Coming to you from the city of the weird. Exploring topics from the esoteric and unexplored to dimensions unknown. Shining a light of truth on the darkest corners of our reality. Welcome to the Curious Realm. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 62 of The Curious Realm. We are just over a year after the rebrand. On occasion, I get a message from people about the rebrand and like, how long have you been around? Things like that. And it's funny to me how Dudes and Beer, my show that is now deprecated for over a year, still gets hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of listens a month. My wife and I were talking about that the other day, and it's literally because of this show. People find out that there was 5 years of this show before it was called Curious Realm. And yeah, it began with my good friend Stephen Bishop out there. How you doing, buddy? Bishop Studios out there wrecking things nowadays. Began with us sitting around a table with somebody every week with a 6-pack of beer and 6 topics. And maybe we'd get through all the beer, maybe we'd get through all the topics, but we're going to have a conversation. And next week, we're going to come back and we're still going to be friends. And that really led to a lot of conversations with out there, fringe authors, fringe topics, things that were really electrifying to society and going on. We featured a lot of folks, even Anonymous contacted us at one point because of some of the guests that we'd had on whenever the George Floyd riots were going on, and Anonymous hacked the computers of the police department there. They contacted us to come on. It was pretty interesting to see the evolution and to see where we are now, especially with guests like Mike Turber. Our first guest tonight will be the amazing Ken Gerhard, author of so many books on cryptozoology, folks. I've literally got a stack of Ken Gerhard books over here next to me, everything from The Essential Guide to Bigfoot, The Essential Guide to the Loch Ness Monster, Menagerie of Mysterious Beasts, Big Bird. Monsters of Texas is great, co-written with Nick Redfern. Some fantastic information, really a leader in the field of cryptozoology. We will be talking with him about cryptids, cryptozoological research after our break. I know we just had Mike Turber on talking about the whole UFO UAP report, which is now an annual report, as we were saying. But here in the last week, we had the interesting situation of the Chinese surveillance balloon flying over America. And Mike Turber actually actively put out this audio this morning. I wanted to play it. That is the actual audio from the F-22 Raptor that took down the Chinese aircraft. That was pretty remarkable to actively see happen. We will be getting into that video and that incident tonight with Mike Turber in the second half. I texted him once things started happening after day 2 of headlines and me posting them like crazy. We both mutually contacted each other, just knowing that like we had to talk about this. And spoiler alert, there is an incredible part of the episode after commercial. Make sure to stay tuned because during our pre-record, for Mike Turber, he was actively interrupted in our phone call by a national security colonel, who he works with to be on a conference call. And he actively conferenced the colonel in with us. We had some bomb audio, quite literally about some of the equipment that was on the Chinese spy craft, how they surveilled the Chinese spy craft, all kinds of fun things. The audio has been cleared. I waited till this morning. As y'all know, I have never edited anything on this show. I have bleeped two things live, and this. He didn't refer to the colonel by name. Departments weren't mentioned, anything like that. However, I by courtesy was like, if I'm going to use this, do you want me to disguise his voice? And the colonel was like, better safe than sorry. But we were cleared to use every bit of the audio except for the one piece of bleeped information about technical equipment, like the classification of equipment on the craft. But I guarantee you there is nobody in the media that has this audio. Nobody has this information. It's pretty incredible. So stay tuned for that after the break, folks. Our first guest in this segment is the amazing King Gerhard. He is a cryptozoologist. He lives right here in Texas. He is literally just fresh off the road. He was out at Sasquatch Fest. How was that event up there in the Great Northwest?
Well, good evening, Christopher. Thank you so much for having me on this evening.
You're welcome.
An honor and a pleasure to be with you, my friend.
Always great to chat with you. I love our conversations just on the side whenever we're at conferences together. I always love chatting with you. So having you on for an unabridged full episode is fantastic.
Oh, awesome, man. Well, I'm sure we're going to have a good time.
Well,
yeah, thanks for asking. Squatch Fest, Longview, Kelso, Washington. Right in the shadow of Mount St. Helens. If any of your listeners have heard of the Ape Canyon incident, which is a pretty famous Bigfoot story from 1924, and just a lot of sightings throughout that area. So there's definitely a tradition in history. And honestly, one thing I really enjoyed about the conference, and I attend Bigfoot conferences around the country these days, and there's usually a good diverse representation of different ideas and things. But this was a strictly quote-unquote aper conference. All of the speakers were basically in the flesh and blood camp and kind of knew the history and tradition of old-style Sasquatching and Bigfooting that really goes back to the idea of a relict hominin running around in the Pacific Northwest, and not so much in the portal UFO side, which I know some people like to kind of address those those ideas, but it's fun sometimes to have just kind of everybody like-minded and kind of discuss. There were a lot of great questions asked during the panel, which I was part of. Where's the poop? That's a question I had just asked Dr. Meldrum earlier that night. He's got all these incredible foot tracks and casts of footprints that are very compelling. But if these animals weigh 1,000 pounds, they're leaving big piles of poop somewhere. So it's just fun to talk about some of those sort of biological questions.
Well, and those questions, I think, are one of the big reasons why I love chatting with you on the side, because you really are not afraid to take them on. You aren't afraid to ask them. A lot of people are happy with just footprints, but yeah, you would think that an animal that large would be leaving scat in regular places.
Big poop.
Yeah. It would stand to reason, and let's start breaking into a little bit of that, because the field of Sasquatch research has grown by leaps and bounds over just the last 5 years, much less the last decade, or since you got involved with it. How long have you been involved? I know at least a good 20 years that I know of.
Yeah, decades. I mean, I like to go back to a time when I was 8 or 9 years old, which, is when I began to immerse myself in Bigfoot books. And there were a lot of great TV shows back in those days, In Search of, and some of those programs. But, a lot of people would say, well, you weren't really researching when you're 8 or 9 years old, but I wasn't a typical 8 or 9 year old. And at 15 years old, I actually attempted my first field research at Loch Ness when I was only 15. So I was there interviewing people trying to film the monster. I had a little movie camera stuff. So I've been doing it off and on throughout my whole life. But full-time research, maybe 20 plus years. In terms of Bigfoot, and I never present myself, nor do I expect anybody to present themselves as kind of the end-all opinion on this subject, because there's so many different avenues of research and excellent investigators. But I have had the distinct honor of conducting field research all over the continent. So I've done Bigfoot research in Alaska with, J. Robert Alley. I've done Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington. I've been to the film site for the Patterson-Gimlin film, Florida skunk ape expeditions, Midwest, Texas, Louisiana. So, and even down into Central America. So I've gotten the opportunity to work with a lot of investigators and look at a lot of potential areas that are, what we refer to as active, and, just get a lot of opinions. And of course I've interviewed, hundreds of eyewitnesses through the years. So yeah, it's all fascinating to me, but I like to try to build that, dossier of well-rounded, information, and try to look at the big picture as opposed to the sort of the minutia of the research.
Well, sure. And especially when you've worked that long and gathered that much research, because once again, even though people doubt the fact that you were researching at the age of 8, what you were doing was reading, which is 3/4 of research, is spending the time in the library. Not that field work isn't fantastic, but you got to research that field work. You got to find out the places to go to begin with. Like when we spoke with Adam Davies, for instance, he does, before he goes out in the field, he's smooth researching things for a year or so. Not only taking local stories and things like that, but, looking at the localized area, and would it even support a critter of that size? Would it have food that it would need to survive? Would it have area by which to breed and populate?
Absolutely. And Adam is, talk about top shelf field researcher.
Yeah.
I can sing off my Bigfoot credentials like I just did, but that guy's been to Lake Tele in the Congo. He's been to Sumatra several times, Mongolia, the Himalayas several times. That is a true worldwide modern day explorer and top-notch field researcher. So it's always an honor to work with Adam in any capacity.
Well, and, when you're looking at this kind of research, once again, the hard questions have to be asked, and you have to be willing to ask them. We, unfortunately, in a lot of communities, have a mentality of the evidentiary pass. And that's not to say that I will always believe the encounter and the witness, until proven otherwise. That's just me, because I've had my own encounters that I know were encounters in some way, shape, or form that I have no evidence of. But they were life-stealing for me and life-changing. So it's interesting to see this field of research and see where it has come to the point of people like Dr. Milgram getting involved and really, really seeing a path forward for a specific field of evidentiary work.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And, it certainly depends on the individual as far as, what approach they want to take as an investigator and, what their perspective is. But I consider myself an old school cryptozoologist with the emphasis on zoologist. And so, I tend to want to look at these specific mysteries and kind of through that lens. So I am looking at biological, probability of some of these things existing as undiscovered animals or relic hominins in the course of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And, obviously if it's a scientific pursuit, then it's all about evidence and, data, which is collected by different researchers, around the country. And, just looking at things in terms of probability. And sometimes that's probably the most challenging thing to do, Christopher, because, we all as individuals have our own levels of confirmation bias, our own influences and experiences that kind of steer us into directions that we may, not be cognizant of. But, the hardest thing to do as an investigator in any facet of the unexplained, whether it's cryptozoology, UFOs, ghosts and the supernatural, I think, is to try to remain as objective as possible and not rely too much on what, we kind of hope to be the case, or our belief systems, or, so we all struggle with that. And I think that's something that I encounter dealing with different investigators around the country, is that, some have, kind of let their passion override their objective critical thinking to some degree. So
Sure. And I mean, that is a regular topic of conversation on this program, Ken, is the topic of conversation. Confirmation bias. The concept that you cannot accept datum, point of datum outside of your data set because it might destroy the data set that you're working with.
Right.
And it's just a point of datum. It's just a point of datum. That's all it is. You're supposed to add it to your data set, and that might change it. And it's really interesting that, that is also one of the big hindrances to this work, not only within the field, like you were saying, amongst researchers themselves, but amongst mainstay science when it comes to this work.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And, I'm certainly don't have any bona fide scientific credentials,
no.
But I've still kind of embraced and adopted that mentality as much as I can. My father was a scientist. Is a scientist, I should say, not active anymore. But, I kind of grew up not in a spiritual household per se, but in more of that kind of scientific household where we discussed astronomy and geology and, whatever earth science is, or, whatever was of interest to us. And I think that instilled at an early age in me kind of that, I have always had a healthy curiosity. And of course, I've always, had a creative sort of romantic side of my personality. I love monster movies like everyone else,
Absolutely.
Godzilla movies and all that stuff. I'd love for there to be dinosaurs running through my backyard, but, so I don't know. You're right. It's about evidence. And I think, again, it's about mathematical probability. So as you know, the scientific methodology is based on, what is the best evidence we have right now? We might get better evidence in the future, but what do we have right now? And what is the most logical conclusion that we can draw, regarding any particular topic based on that evidence that's available and also accepted or peer reviewed by other, objective individuals that will all look at the evidence independently and say, okay, I think we can all agree that this is the most likely thing. And that doesn't mean that ultimately that is what will be proven to be the case. It's just, it's a foundation.
Yeah, exactly. It is at least a launching point and a point that everybody involved with the research, both side stream and mainstream science, can get involved with and get behind. And I think that is one of the most interesting things, especially when it comes to, it's much more so in the cryptid realm than in the paranormal realm, I think, that citizen science has really, really stepped up as far as helping with the evidence chain, helping collect evidence, things like that. Even a lot of, I forget which documentary I was watching, where they were doing a big bear study. And it may have been here in Texas where they actively reached out to Sasquatch hunters because they were out in parts of the woods that they didn't have the funding to go to.
Right.
So it's like, please give us any trail cam footage you can give us, that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting to see this cross communication between things. Now, of course, when you're talking about evidence, like we were saying a minute ago, Adam starts off with localized stories, and I'm gonna pop a map up on screen that I pop up regularly whenever we are talking about Sasquatch. This is a map of Sasquatch sightings across the United States that is kept by arcgis.com, arcgis.com. You can go by there, check it out. You can zoom into these sightings. You can get, if I'm not mistaken, even GPS coordinates. But if you look at this concentration of sightings up here, like it's really interesting. Whenever you A/B that with the shot of the United States from night, from the International Space Station, because it really does give you that example of how possible it could be. You know, while there are a lot over here in these populated areas, stuff like that, there's quite a swath right over here in the Pacific Northwest, that kind of stuff. And there is definitely, when you're talking about Upper Oregon, Washington State, things like that, like there is straight up rainforest there. Like there's easily a good 5 planes that go missing per decade up there, and they do not find them. Planes have transponders, you know. So it's really interesting that, yeah, there is still this, because a lot of the big argument from people is, we've settled so much of the United States, we'd have found that critter by now. We'd have run across him, right? And I don't think so. I don't know. This map, granted, is 10 years ago. This is 2012. It's one of the most detailed and best maps out there by night. But that just gives you an idea of how much of the United States is still unsettled. Still no power, everything else. So pretty interesting to look at, and really does lay the groundwork for, no, there is a great possibility.
No, you're absolutely correct. And, you know, there's something else that just occurred to me looking at that map is that, you know, there's something that we do have in common with Bigfoot or Sasquatch, if it exists, which is, you know, it needs resources. And the human population centers around the United States tend to be based around places that have availability to resources that we've needed, such as water, you know, ports and harbors, rivers, lumber, timber supplies, you know, you can build things with wood or whatever. And so, you know, Sasquatch is going to need a lot of those same types of resources in terms of, so there is a little bit of overlap there in terms of, now, obviously Sasquatch, Bigfoot was here first. So we kind of moved in along with other things that were here first. And of course the indigenous people, but, you know, we kind of came in and took the spots that were favorable to us. But, you know, there are some things about the map I'd also like to point out. One being that we, you know, it's kind of restricted to the United States. Well, particularly British Columbia has probably got a very, very healthy population of Sasquatches. That's borne out by the anecdotal evidence, the native traditions, and just the amount of resources that are up there. But, you know, in order to have an observation, an encounter, you have to have an observer on hand. And so there are probably Sasquatches and Bigfoots running around in all parts of North America where people are just not going and not seeing them. So, but we don't have, the noticeable things are, you know, there certainly are not a lot of Bigfoot or Sasquatch reports coming from some of the wide open plain states. And, you know, there are some, a handful, but places like Kansas and the Dakotas and, I mean, where you don't have as much in terms of forest, you know, so it's a different kind of like a savanna type habitat. And it would make sense that Sasquatches would tend to favor, you know, forested areas and mountainous areas. And again, the legends and traditions and anecdotal evidence kind of supports that too, that the Sasquatches in native tongues were often referred to as the Bushmen, or they were considered to be inhabitants of the mountains, mountain ranges, and living at higher altitudes and things like that as well. So,
well, and that's a really interesting point to bring up, because while people tend to skirt the real depth of stories of Sasquatch and other related critters with the Native Americans. They're like, oh yeah, sure, they have stories. Like, they have stories of active trading in some of these tribes, where they are considered literally a tribe that lives in the woods So deep do some of them go that there are actual warnings about, like, don't share salmon with them. You share salmon with them and you'll get caught in their world and they'll have control over you. All kinds of things. And it's interesting because it's not like it's part of their quote folklore. It's more like it's part of their oral tradition than their folklore.
Right. Well, you get a mixed bag. And so, while we're on the subject, I mean, one of my pet peeves is when there are these kind of gross generalizations about, and I've heard people make declarations like, well, all the Native Americans thought this about Bigfoot, or, believed that they were spirits, or, whatever they say.
No.
And there were at least 150 distinct nations, tribes across North America. And you can't kind of lump them all together. They all had very distinct, belief systems and traditions and cultures. And so some, like you said, some viewed Bigfoots or Sasquatches as another tribe that lived more, out in the mountains or whatever. Some tribes viewed them as more of a spiritual type thing, based on perhaps their worldview and religion and whatever. Some viewed them as more dangerous, the quote unquote cannibal giants, the Gilyuk, things like that. So yeah, that kind of bugs me, Christopher, when people say, well, the Native Americans thought this about Bigfoot. It's like, well, which Native Americans?
Yeah.
There are 150 different tribes.
Which tradition? Which tradition?
You have to address them individually.
Well, and once again, even making that distinction between folklore and myth and oral tradition, because there's a distinction there, and
sure.
There's the oral tradition is more of what they've passed down generation to generation, as far as instructions, things like that, moral codes, that kind of stuff. Ceremonial things, as opposed, and even the tradition of their origins, that kind of stuff, as opposed to the myths of the fox and that kind of stuff, which are much more like Aesop fables almost.
Sure. Whenever
you get into them, still moral tales, but not a part of their true on religious belief, so to speak. More stories for children. And it's interesting to see that, and to see once again, even how people want to pigeonhole that. When it comes to this
human tendency. I'm not trying to make too many enemies on your show tonight, but sometimes I sound like, the big naysayer, but
no, it is very important, because that is one of the reasons I wanted to chat with you tonight. One of the things that we do on this show, Ken, is demystify. And don't get me wrong, I am a believer's believer, man. But I break hearts when it comes to things on groups. That kind of, I've spent 30 years of my life with a lens in my hand as a videographer editing, so whenever I see aberrations on film that people are showing and claiming to be something on an infrared camera, I really quick get into shutter math and beats per second of wings, and things like that help explain the blur of stuff on cameras. So it's like, I'm not trying to break your heart, but my God, if you had that many things in your backyard, you'd be selling tickets, Jack. You wouldn't be on this forum. I'd be seeing an ad for your backyard and the prices.
Yeah. Well, that's, well said, my friend. And I mean, and I'm on the record saying this before, but I'm completely open-minded to the probability really, that there are things in our world that we don't understand yet. And some of those may be unknown animals. Some of them may be UAPs and aerial phenomenon. Some of them are probably like spiritual or interdimensional, or however people want to characterize some of those sort of metaphysical things. I'm fully convinced that some of that stuff does happen, but the danger is in accepting things, like we were talking about, just because it makes our life more interesting and exciting, as opposed to where the evidence leads.
Yeah.
And, what are some of the most likely explanations for different things. So, I am a bit of a skeptic, and I do like to try to debunk things that, first and foremost. But I'm also open-minded. I am.
You've got to have an open dose of skepticism, and a proper skeptic is willing to accept the fact that, wow, that's a new point of datum to add to my data set. And willing to even back up and go, whoa, wait a minute. I was utterly wrong. That's a proper skeptic. And that is literally what science is called to do, is be that skeptic. To go, okay, so you think this. Let's, through scientific means, test the hypothesis. Because you're allowed to hypothesize any whack crazy thing in science. You can hypothesize anything you want. Through proper testing and methodology, we will prove or disprove that hypothesis, and then it becomes a theory.
Well,
and then through further test and proof, hey, who knows? It may become a law of science, but even that isn't unchangeable. My astronomy book from high school, and I made an A+, 110, only class I ever got an award in. But my astronomy book has Pluto in it as a planet. My son's astronomical chart in his room does not. Science has changed in my lifetime.
Sure. Yeah, it does happen. You're right. Some of those old long-standing theories have been overturned, and that'll continue to happen for as long as we're alive.
And new evidence has come around, new means of examining evidence, Ken. And I think that is really, let's get into that real quick, because that's really where we're at right now with the world of large primate research and Sasquatch and Bigfoot research, is these new forms of evidence gathering that forensically we have been able to bring forth.
Yeah, well, let's start with, since this is a nice segue from what you were just talking about. So the paradigm of human evolution has changed radically in recent years based on a number of remarkable discoveries and new findings and things that are being excavated in Africa, Asia, and elsewhere. The terminology has changed. So what we now refer to as a hominidae, which is basically the great ape, the family of great apes, and humans. Humans, our closest living relatives are the chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans. Well, actually, orangutans are now hominids, so we're just talking about the African apes and humans. We're all hominins, and we think that we shared a common ancestor with, chimpanzees and gorillas and bonobos starting about 7 million years ago. And at some point around that time period, some of these hominins began walking upright and bipedally. And it's not a direct, we used to have this old, when I was going to high school, you had the graphic of like the chimp evolving into the, Australopithecine, into, Homo erectus, and it was like a linear thing. Well, we now know that the human tree, the hominins, that family tree is very bushy with a lot of, side branches and dead ends and so forth. So Homo sapiens, we're here to talk about this. So we're perhaps the most successful of all the hominins because we're having podcasts where we can talk about our family tree. I don't know if any other hominins have been able to put that together yet, but as it relates to Bigfoot, the fascinating thing is that there are two timelines that have been gradually shifting. One is the timeline I was just talking about, where bipedalism, walking upright on 2 feet, that timeline has gone back further and further in time. It used to be 2-3 million. Then they started discovering, Lucy in the early 70s, Africanus, and now we have Ramapithecus. So we know that hominins, great apes, were walking around on their hind legs starting about 7 million years ago. Well, Sasquatch, Bigfoot, that's one of the key characteristics that people always report and describe, is that it looks like an ape, but it walks around pretty efficiently on its hind legs. It's very similar to the way we walk, which makes it very startling to us. The other thing is, there were these assumed extinction dates for things like Homo erectus, one of our predecessors, the Neanderthals, and some of these other species. And now we have discovered in recent years very archaic, primitive hominins like Homo naledi in Africa, Homo luzonensis in the Philippines, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia. All of these hominins that had very primitive features, they were bipedal, but very primitive in other ways, were around as recently as 50 to 250,000 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is basically right on the brink of, when human, civilization began to spring up with agriculture and some of those other things. So that timeline keeps moving to the present. Why is that important with regard to Bigfoot or Sasquatch? Well, the best hypothesis we have right now is that it is a surviving hominin from, the Pleistocene, tens of thousands of years ago, and that it's still alive, and that we just have not discovered, or science has not verified that it is still alive and living alongside of us. And, that's huge because 50,000 years, it used to be 100,000 years or 200,000 years that any type of primitive hominin was living alongside Homo sapiens. So it's now becoming more probable with all these discoveries that this timeline is going to move further and further closer to the present. So that's kind of exciting in terms of paleoanthropology, that we have some actual science there that's being done in terms of discovery of hominin fossils and sort of we haven't quite gotten to DNA and phylogenetic testing. We don't have any DNA on any of these. They're too old, but it kind of creates more of a foundation of reality for something like Bigfoot or Sasquatch existing if you accept that it is simply a hominin with primitive features that is still alive and, that we just assumed had gone extinct a long time ago.
Yeah, precisely. And it follows to reason that that can happen. I was just popping up on the screen a rare deer-like species that was photographed in Vietnam. And that was one that, researchers had been in the area for decades, and heard stories of these from local people. And they're like, oh, you're crazy. Deer with flaps on their noses. What are you talking about? But sure enough, they ended up finding them. And, even during the pandemic, we found record numbers of new species. We are regularly finding new species, much less, like you're saying, new branches of the basically Denisovian line, the early parts of humanity, where, like we were told when we were younger, there were 4 or 5 in between chimp and man.
Right.
More than likely 4,000 or 5,000 would be, and especially if you look at any evolutionary tree, there are tons of dead end stumps, where an adaptation was attempted and just didn't work out. Or it was so localized that once things spread, it was no longer necessary. So
sort of niche species that didn't have the ability to adapt to the rapidly changing environments.
Sure.
Very true. So I guess I let my kind of aperism take hold of me and get me overexcited there, Christopher. But why is this important in terms of looking at Bigfoot or Sasquatch through a scientific lens? To those that think and believe that Bigfoot is something that is interdimensional, an extraterrestrial, or something from, out of a portal from another linear multiverse, situation, why does it look exactly like one of the archaic hominins in our family tree? So it's just going back to sort of rational thinking, critical thinking, which is if it looks like something that we have in the fossil record that's, say, 2 million years old, why do we have to make a case or an argument that it's not from this planet, that it's somehow from another dimension or I don't know. I guess people have different ways of kind of explaining where these things come from, but it displays physical characteristics that actually fit within the evolutionary paradigm of our family tree. So to me, that makes a much stronger case for it being simply an undiscovered relic hominin as opposed to something extraterrestrial or interdimensional or, however people want to characterize it.
Sure. And, we've had the conversation privately. I've had the conversation on the show numerous times. I am a believer in all of that, every bit of it. However, am I a believer that Sasquatch as we know it is that? I don't think so. Do I think that there have been people that have had interesting encounters? Is it the fact that a lot of Sasquatch cases are now involving the other? Sure. There are a lot of cross-report cases like that. However, we've had the conversation with numerous other guests. Is it possibly that another entity is kind of hijacking our psyche and giving us what we would be comfortable seeing as opposed to them? That's a much more great likelihood than this biological entity being interdimensionally capable.
No, that's well stated. So, and I guess I definitely agree with you because I've had conversations with researchers that are convinced that Bigfoot is not simply an undiscovered relic hominin or whatever, and it's usually based on these kind of periphery things that they've experienced, which are pretty strange and pretty far out and weird. So I guess I've also conceded that there may in fact be a phenomenon. I guess this is what you're saying, that something that basically looks like or people interpret as Bigfoot or Sasquatch for whatever reason. So that we may be actually dealing with two different types of Bigfoots or Sasquatches, which sounds very superficially confusing, but it's really just two distinct phenomenon that have a very similar interpretation to us, at least. Yeah,
a similar phenomenology, but separate phenomena. And that is exactly the conversation that we've had with folks like Ryan Tremblay and other people, Jason McLean, numerous paranormal investigators, even Nathaniel Gillis, when talking about alien abduction, that sure, there are numerous genuine alien abduction cases. However, more than likely, a lot of the greater ones are along this line where something has used their psyche to do that. And it's an interesting avenue of study to take, especially whenever you're talking the paranormal Bigfoot connection that once again has really cropped up in the last 5 to 10 years of Sasquatch research. And it's been interesting to see not only in UFO, UAP communities, but in Sasquatch and other cryptid communities, the acceleration of things because of the shows that exist that are out there. Not necessarily the documentary shows like what you're on, that kind of stuff, but the popular plot-driven shows, Expedition Bigfoots, and things like that. Where I'm not denying what they are and their popularity and everything else, but there has been a beautiful thing to the opening of conversation because of them. Once again, because of these shows, because of things like the UFO UAP committee, people are emboldened to come forward with their story now, and it's fantastic.
That's true.
It's great.
True. I do appreciate the fact that these kinds of conversations are,
they're much more common than they used to be.
Yeah, they're not as uncomfortable as they used to be.
Yeah.
People can speak openly about their experiences or their opinions. Or
I no longer have to preface it with, so have you ever heard of Coast to Coast AM? Which back in the 90s, that's what I used to have to do. Because, hey, at least some folks were up late at night or had heard of it or had a brother that listened to it or what have you. And they'd be like, okay, now I know what you're talking about. But yeah, now it's much more common and it's a much more open plate to have the common conversation with people on it. However, I've really seen at the same time, especially with stuff like MUFON, that kind of thing. Because once again, the MUFON world, and this is for all of you out there that listen to the show, I love y'all. But I'm a MUFON benefactor. Like I'm a lifetime giver to MUFON now. And whenever I started this show, Ken, there were a few things that I decided to get behind personally. MUFON was one of them. Because yes, they are on the forefront of the scientific search. When it came to the UFO UAP committee, a lot of the questions that were asked of them were sourced from MUFON. But a lot of people don't like them because when they come to them with a video, they can explain it. Sometimes pretty rapidly. And they tend to break a lot of hearts. And that's unfortunate, but they are not there to absorb every account. They are there to take every account in, look at the evidence as given, and weigh it as such. And if it doesn't evidentiarily have anything, then they move forward with other investigations, and a lot of people take personal offense to that. And because of that are in the community, like against MUFON, because like, I sent them a video and they just did this. It's like, well, unfortunately, 90 to 95% of videos are fully explainable. But proper scientists look at that 5% deviation.
Sure.
Any scientist that sees a 5 to 10% deviation and accepts that, like, dude, you can't fill that in with caulk. Like, I wouldn't get a B or a C for that in wood shop, much less in science. Like close doesn't count. So when you've got a 5 to 10% deviation in evidence, you have to explore what that 5% deviation is and why it exists and why it's there.
Sure.
No,
you're absolutely right. There are a lot of parallels, I think, between, the search for, cryptids, UFO investigation. I have many friends that are very active in the supernatural, metaphysical, parapsychology. I mean, all of it's fascinating. I've always found all of it fascinating. And I think there certainly may be some parallels. I'm just not necessarily sold that there are, connections kind of in the way that Fordian philosophy, if any of your listeners are familiar, Charles Fort was perhaps the first one that kind of lumped all of these weird things together and it kind of made sense in a way, and again, going back to the evidence thing, in terms of like, yes, there are certainly people that have had experiences. I'm not going to challenge anyone and say that they haven't had experiences that are really far out and inexplicable and far beyond simply a big ape running around in the woods. They extend beyond that.
Yeah.
But I don't think we have enough evidence to really form any conclusions about that at this point. We need a lot more evidence to form any kind of hypothesis. So some people do so, willingly because I think this goes back to what we kind of started the show with is just, the confirmation biases and sort of the personal investment that people make in these experiences.
Yeah, full-on want of personal confirmation.
Yeah, it's hard to step back from that. I'd say most of the messages I get, I get a lot of messages on social media and stuff, and it's people, and I appreciate it. Please keep sending me these videos and photos or bits of evidence that they found. And, 9 times out of 10, you really can't draw a conclusion from any of it. But I get the sense that a lot of folks that they're looking for some type of, reassurance or confirmation. And, there's just not enough data there to do that most of the time. Like you said, particularly when it comes to a photo or a video or something along those lines. So
at least to fully base a yes on what's provided. Especially when, here's a prime example. I'll show it on screen right now. I could take this video right here, Ken, and I could post that on any social media group and say, look at what I recorded over my backyard in Austin last night. And this wasn't last night. This was a couple months ago. Pretty wild looking video. Pretty interesting. What you are looking at is the Dog Star Sirius out of focus. being recorded on video. So you're looking at the big black thing in the middle is the actual black support disc in the middle of the mirror on my telescope.
Wow.
You're looking at the rim, and Sirius is the brightest star in the night sky. And it's also one of them that twinkles between blue and red. So what you're seeing here that's out of focus is literally my iris trying to keep up between the flash rate of the star and the flash rate of the iris. I could post that up in any social media group, blind, and guaranteed I'd get 10 people going, I saw that too.
No, that's a fair point.
And we have to be careful for that. We have to be careful for that. We have to be, unfortunately, Ken, we have to be willing to break hearts. I have been posting these videos in those groups with the caveat of this is what I recorded. This is what it actually is. Now consider if I'd posted it with none of that. Because most of the time people aren't even like posting what time it was, what day of the week it was, what direction they were looking, important things to figure out if you're in a flight path or if it's a star in the night sky. Like a ton of things can be figured out from just those pieces of information.
Very cool. Very cool.
And we have to be careful because, the want for confirmation is there, especially if you're a believer's believer, which I know you're a believer's believer. You've definitely had your experiences with things, and it's one of those that doesn't mean that you don't want confirmation fully. What would confirmation be for you, Ken? Full on, what would you need to see on paper to fully prove the existence of the hominid known as Bigfoot?
Bigfoot Sasquatch here?
Yeah.
Okay, so
just the hominid known as Bigfoot.
I have my own hierarchy of evidence, and at the top of the list is a body or a part of a body, which could include a bone, a tooth, some skin, anything that you could drive DNA from, which would, be typically blood, flesh, body fluids. So body, parts of a body, that's kind of at the top of my own personal hierarchy. Then I have below that physical evidence like hair that may not be DNA friendly per se. You have to have a good chunk of the follicle or a certain a level of the chromosomes, the genetic material.
Yeah, even the oil.
Right. So things like hair, and then physical trace evidence like footprints. I said hair and scat, I guess we put on the silo. Footprints, physical trace, footprints, handprints, butt prints, body prints, markings on trees and things that may have been dug out or manipulated and things like that. And then kind of at the bottom of the list for me, and sadly, Christopher, in this day and age, are things like photographic evidence and audio recordings, because those are usually so highly subjective and inconclusive. I mean, you may have a really weird sound on your recorder.
Yeah.
Maybe you got that out in the woods, but there are a lot of things out there that can make weird sounds in the woods at night. It doesn't necessarily make a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch. And the same with a video or a photo. You may have gotten an image of something moving through the trees. Well, there are big animals that move through trees. There are people that move through trees. There are optical illusions and things that I think you're the tech guy. So I think you were talking earlier about all the variables involved in terms of the apparatus of a camera. I mean, you've got all these components, lenses and filters, and then you're converting it to digital. And there's a lot of, all of that stuff. And the reason I bring this up, you were with us at the Texas Bigfoot conference this past year, Christopher, and someone in the audience was asking about, like, why don't you guys invest all of this time and money into analyzing all the photos and audio? And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense, because what we should be focusing on are the bodies and the DNA and the blood, because that's a much quicker way to come to a resolution than something highly, inconclusive. And any scientist that you try to take a video or an audio recording to is not probably going to give you the time of the day.
Yeah.
But if you throw something empirical on the table, like a bone or a tooth or some hair or blood, now you've got a discussion going, because that's something that can be measured and tested and hopefully conclusive.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, and granted, even the Patterson-Gimlin film, which is one of those that has still withstood good forensic testing, even with modern video, has yet to be pushed off as a full-on photographic fakery. There's a lot forensically going on there in the video that can be absolutely shown to be something real.
It'll never be proven either way, Christopher.
No, it won't be.
It'll never be totally debunked, and it'll never totally be proven 60-some years later because, just as you said, I mean, we were lucky to get that bit of footage because, Patterson was running and the camera's shaky, and it was actually, because of the lens he was using and stuff, it was a teeny little figure in a bigger frame, and so we can do kinds of cool enhancements and things, but that's not an area that I would exert a lot of energy, in this day and age either.
Well, and I'm here to tell you folks, I'm an audio video editor. You want to send it to me? I'll send you my rate sheet. You'd be much better off spending your commas and zeros on DNA testing. And on proper evidentiary gathering out in the field, with forensic kits and things like that, than with trying to forensically examine every photograph, piece of video or audio that comes around. Because that goes into vapid amounts of man hours, which gets expensive really quick. Either you're spending the money or you're spending the time. One of the two.
Well stated.
So which ultimately is money. And even the fact of this last year, here in Texas, right there in your backyard, the Texas Chupacabra at the zoo, that was a big old kerfuffle that happened. And what is it? Is it a misshapen tree? Is it a wolf man? Is it a Chupacabra? That was all over the headlines countrywide for weeks, months almost. Utterly explainable trick of light and object. So it's interesting, like you said, we could vapidly waste all day long looking at that stuff, and it's fantastic. But probably what it does more than anything is drive us to a point of confirmation bias, and get us to a point where we might reluctantly. I wouldn't even say reluctantly, but negligently follow rabbit holes that we shouldn't follow.
This is true.
Ken, I want to thank you for taking the time, not only to come on the show, because I want you to come on the show again and again and again. You're right down the road. We should really make it more regular, but for always being so candid about things, because this is truly a life's work for you. And I'm one of those that like I said, I am a believer's believer, but when it comes down to it, I think that we all need to focus on all of these things in a much more scientific light. Not that witness testimony isn't fantastic and beautiful and amazing, but we need to be focusing on science and evidentiary gathering, things like that. So, I want to thank you for your emphasis on that in your work.
Thank you, my brother. I appreciate your kind words.
Well, speaking of your work, it is time for shameless self-promotion. So let everybody know. I know you're going to the Legends and Monsters conference here in Cibolo, right outside of San Antonio, coming up soon. But you've got a full-on schedule of shows coming up. Where can people go to follow you to keep up with those? Where are your next shows? Where can they go other than the Curious Realms store to buy your books?
Well, I appreciate it, Christopher. I do have a website, kengerhard.com. I'm also on social media, of course, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I have a YouTube channel. People can go to Amazon and look me up if they're interested in my books as well. But as far as public appearances, I will be at Alien Con in Pasadena, California on March 4th and 5th. Be at the Monsters and Legends event, as you said, March 18th in Cibolo. March 31st and April 1st, I will be in Leesville, Louisiana for the Bigfoot Roadshow.
Oh, great.
April 28th through 30th, I'll be at the East Tennessee Paracon in Morristown, and I'll be doing a Bigfoot night hunt with Adam Davis. Tickets available for that. May 13th, the West Texas Paracon. Just got booked for that up in Ballinger. I'm excited about that. West
cool.
Texas has needed an event for a while.
Yeah.
And then June 17th, I'll be at the Spokane Valley Sasquatch Roundup in Spokane, Washington. June 23rd and 24th at the West Virginia Bigfoot Festival in Sutton. And I just got rebooked for the Arkansas Paranormal Expo in October. That's
awesome.
in Little Rock. So
awesome, man. Congratulations. That is, once again, a chock full calendar of travel for you for the years. So good for you, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Appreciate it.
Well, once again, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to have you on again and again. I'll be sharing it. I mean, all this went out live tonight, but I'll be sharing links tomorrow and everything else. So thanks so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks again for having me, Christopher, and thank you to everyone who listened in.
Absolutely.
Be safe out there.
Hey, you take care. We're going to go ahead and move on to our commercial break. While you are online checking out all the amazing work of King Gerhard for folks, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is our website. CuriousRealm.com/store is where you can go to find all of our merchandise as well as books from our guests, paranormal equipment, things like that. You can also find the link to our latest affiliate, KPNL Radio, kpnl-db.com is the website. Stop on by. You can check us out in replay every Wednesday night as well as other great shows, great content, great music. When we come back from this commercial break, folks, we will be joined by our good friend and investigator with 5x5 News, Mike Turber. We will be discussing the recent Chinese balloon incursion and the intel behind that, other incursions that have happened, the incursion in Latin America, and we are interrupted at about minute 15 by an actual conversation by a national security personnel who invites Mike on for an interesting conversation. We have some bombshell revelations during that conversation. So stay tuned for that. About halfway through Mike Turber's interview, coming up right after these messages, folks. With the rise in attention to the health benefits of cannabis and cannabinoids, including CBD, True Hemp Science has become one of the premier providers of full-spectrum CBD and CBD-related products. Using a proprietary spagyric process, True Hemp Science extracts maximum benefit from the whole hemp plant. Buds, leaves, stems, seeds, even roots. Every part of the plant is used and then reused to formulate a rich, complex profile of CBD, CBD derivatives, and terpenes guaranteed to provide the relief and benefits you need daily. Visit TrueHempScience.com to experience the best CBD oils, edibles, and topicals on the market today. And use code CURIOUS7 to save 7% off your entire purchase of $50 or more and get 2 25-milligram CBD cookies or brownies free. That website again is TrueHempScience.com and the code is CURIOUS7.
Have you considered starting a podcast? Looking for a way to make your business a voice of authority in an industry? Then Podcast Cadet is the solution for you. Whether starting a podcast for yourself, your brand, business, school, church, or just plain fun, Podcast Cadet is here to help you navigate the waters of the podcast industry. Specializing in one-on-one consultation and training with industry professionals in fields ranging from podcast technology and editing to distribution, monetization, and even social media strategies. Podcast Cadet tailors their services to the specific needs of you and your podcast. Do you already have a podcast and trying to find ways to engage and grow your audience? Sign up for your Podcast Cadet audit today and let us help you explore new and exciting ways to leverage your content and elevate your podcast brand to whole new levels. From consultational workshops to affordable podcast production and maintenance packages, Podcast Cadet is your one-stop shop for everything podcast related on the internet. Visit podcastcadet.com today to sign up for your consultation or training and use code CURIOUS20 to save 20% off your entire purchase. That website again is podcastcadet.com.
The Curious Realm Podcast is your source for the latest and greatest news and events in the world of the paranormal, esoteric, and forbidden knowledge. And there's no better way to spark the conversation than with items from the Curious Realm store. Choose from fan favorites like hoodies, mouse pads, coffee mugs, and more. Buy books and items from your favorite Curious Realm guests. Get your hands on the latest gear for paranormal investigations and experiments we discuss on the show. Open your web browser and stop on by the Curious Realm store at curiousrealm.com/store to buy the latest Curious Realm wear and out-of-this-world gifts for yourself, your family, or a mind that you want to open. That website again is curiousrealm.com/store. Hello, everybody, and welcome back from that commercial break. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors. Thank you also for our new network affiliate out there, KPNL Radio. Loving what they are doing. We're out there being broadcast every Wednesday night with them. About to do some station drops, station IDs, things like that for them. And they've got some great content out there, some good music, as well as other shows like Spaced Out Radio, all kinds of things. So go by and check them out, folks. That is KPNL at KPNL Radio. So, yeah, you can find them if you go to our website, actually, curiousrealm.com, right down here. Is their website. So you can go to kpnl-db.com and check out all the amazing shows. Great lineups of guests. Our guest in this segment is the amazing Mike Turber. Mike Turber comes to us regularly with security things, stuff like that. And he was on last week. We were kind of breaking down and decoding the now annual UFO UAP report from Congress. And lo and behold, all of 3 days later, we had the wildness begin in the news cycle that was the Chinese spy balloon. So we are going to be discussing what you're looking at right now is the actual footage from Washington Post of the balloon being shot down. You can see the shot right there. Wham. It's coming in. Boosh. Just blew it up. And, yeah, remarkable stuff. This is not the first incursion over U.S. airspace by a balloon, especially by China. I guarantee you it will not be the last, and I guarantee you that that is not the only object that we are tracking in the skies over America as we speak, folks. Welcome back to the show, Mike Turber. Been a long time, bud. How you doing?
Oh, my God. How long has it been, sir? My memory escapes me at the moment.
Long enough that you're being pre-recorded.
Oh, my gosh. I've advanced to pre-recorded.
That's right. You've advanced to the second part of the schedule.
Oh, wow. That's a good time slot. So now I know where I rank.
Yeah. Oh, don't say that.
I thought the live guys were the cool guys.
And you're cold as ice. Speaking of cold as ice, this balloon, man, I'm showing the footage right now of it just falling. Now, a couple things about this balloon. Mm-hmm. Number one, superstar status to the balloon. Like you may as well have put Harambe's face on the side.
Oh, you might as well. It had a leading role at Saturday Night Live too. I mean, it was on there.
Like it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's great. The memes have been fantastic. I've seen quite a few of like the red balloon. Like French balloon releases sentimental feelings.
I can't wait till we hear a takeoff of like a Weird Al Yankovic version song with 99 red lift balloons or something.
Yeah, exactly. But all joking aside, this incursion, and make no mistake, folks, this was an incursion. This wasn't an accidental drift. This is not a weather balloon that's just going with the eddies and ebbs and flows of the jet stream.
Absolutely not.
This is a directionally able balloon. All the balloon is for is flotation. What is underneath it is the size of 3 city buses.
The interesting thing here is this. I can confirm absolutely right now the following information I'm about to give you, which I think this broadcast will be on Tuesday, but it'll be 24 hours after this. But regarding the balloon, they mentioned that the balloon is a civilian balloon. Number one, obviously it's not based on the antennas that it has. And two, they stated that the balloon not only was a civilian balloon, but it was blown off of course. They're making that same statement with the balloon in Latin America. So they have a problem with apparently either navigating these balloons or they are lying. I'm going to go with the latter.
I'm going to go with the lie myself, mainly because there's no way air drift wise that 2 balloons launched from the same place would end up that disparately apart.
Right.
And prime example would be we didn't have any examples of explosions of bombs in Latin America or bombs being dropped by balloon by the Japanese that floated that far south. Didn't happen.
Correct. Didn't happen. And balloons are most people, when they hear the term balloon, they think of archaic technology. Yeah. They think of non-sophisticated, something that, I've seen some comments of, we destroyed a balloon. We had an F-22 go after a balloon as the highest air-to-air confirmed kill in history. And I'm thinking, and they're making it sound like, we destroyed this wimpy balloon, which technically is factually correct. But
sure.
These balloons, once they enter our airspace, they should be considered an immediate target. This balloon should have been destroyed off the Aleutians, but there's several reasons to allow it to go. One is to find out what its intentions are, and you're not going to find out what the intentions are unless you let it go.
Sure.
And we know it's not really a huge threat. We're going to obviously politicize the hell out of it and say that this is the biggest threat since whatever. It's destroying our relations with China and utilize that in whatever means necessary from the political side that I don't really get into that much. But from a military standpoint, this balloon has entered our airspace. This balloon has been monitored since well before anyone is probably much aware. We tracked it a long time. President Biden was informed or briefed on the balloon on Tuesday and made the decision to knock it out of the sky, which was his words. I don't know if that's been put out there yet, but whatever.
Yeah.
He said, knock it out of the sky. But obviously there was some advisors that have advise the military to not necessarily do that. And the advisors actually are in the military, and it was a wise decision. Basically, you don't want to bring it down over any area of CONUS and have a piece hit something that creates a different issue. So the decision to destroy it off the coast, I kind of agree with. I guess given all the possibilities, yeah.
There's two things, and I mentioned this in the Curious Realm group. I was just scrolling through all the articles, literally just pages and pages and pages of articles. And a lot of people are like, why do you post so much about the same thing? And it's like, because it's all different angles of the same story, and you'd be surprised what articles are no longer available later. So the more you can post and the more you can cross-confirm facts, the better. That's why I do it.
And it does, and it's good that you do that, because I cover the news if possible. If it's a story that I'm involved in, that's generally when I start, covering stuff. I've obviously been in some sort of a hiatus for a while now for reasons which you're aware of. The most people don't know about, but my Afghanistan efforts has quite a lot to do with that.
Yeah.
But anyway, passing that, there's the information that gets leaked out is leaked out for apparently reasons. And one of those key aspects that was asked to, I guess, be released or the information was no longer an issue was the other balloon that was coming across the Pacific.
Yep.
Within an hour, I think it was an hour and 38 minutes or whatever, right around that time frame after this balloon was shot down, that balloon was sent a kill signal. At the time that it went down, I didn't know if we had shot it down or it had a problem or what, but I have, after the fact, been able to determine that a kill signal was sent to that balloon to give it a slow death into the Pacific Ocean, and that's apparently what it
to
did.
Basically scuttle itself.
Yeah, and that was used as leverage in a phone call to our State Department to basically say, look, we ditched this other one, and we still want to continue with the Blinken meeting, and that wasn't going to happen. And I'm looking out the front window here, and some guy just tried to do a wheelie on his bike, and his front wheel came off when he did it, and he just face planted. I'm sorry. Live.
Okay.
This is about as live as it gets. You can edit this part out, but man, that just really distracted me.
I edit nothing, and you know that.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Okay. Well, I was sitting here. I was looking. I was going to do the launch, and the delay of the launch for SpaceX till 8:30 has something to do with apparently what's going on now. But anyway.
Well, and like I said, I guarantee you, that is not the only object over America that's being tracked. There was one over Latin America. There was one, I heard rumbles about one. I'm pretty sure that I saw an article about one in Canada.
Correct. And it's in very, very northern Canada. It is almost Arctic. So that one's still aloft.
Now, there's a couple reasons, two reasons that I posted today on the group where I was showing all the articles from on Facebook for shooting it down where they shot it down. Number one, yes, it hovered for a long time over Malmstrom and the nuclear fields in Montana.
Yeah.
For a long time.
The loitering capability of a balloon is exactly one of the advantages that balloons have.
Yeah.
And balloons that hover between a lot of people wonder, well, if it was keep in mind, here's how you know for a fact it's not a weather balloon. Weather balloons go up to like 100,000 feet or so. Some of them can loiter in that range that this balloon was in, but not with the types of antennas that this thing had and the transmissions that was being recorded off of it.
Not only that, the general shape of this balloon, especially at low altitude, because you have to remember the distinctive shape that we see of a weather balloon where it's a long tapered tail is because once it gets up into altitude and atmosphere, the air inside expands.
Exactly.
And it takes on a full balloon type shape.
Right.
This thing at altitude is not like that.
Right.
And that's how you can tell it's not a weather balloon, because it's not made to go that high. It's not made to skirt space.
Right. And plus, weather balloons do not have that large of an instrumentation package hanging from the bottom of it with large solar panels.
You got something the size of a bucket, not something the size of 3 city buses hanging off of it.
Exactly.
And that's one reason why they did. A lot of people are like, why didn't they shoot it down immediately? Number one, dude, you're talking something the size of 3 city buses. That's like a 747 falling out of the air.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to predict its path on the way down? You're going to make sure it doesn't land on a school or a neighborhood or anything? And now, granted, they probably could have done that in Montana.
They could have done it without probably hitting. We don't want a moose getting hit. Now, come on now.
Well,
there's
however,
per mile.
The other unintended possible consequence is, forget the package underneath. Who knows what biological material is inside of the helium in the balloon that, if blown up, would follow jet stream and just spread itself across the country.
Exactly.
Whereas if you wait for it to get out over water like they did, you can corral it with Coast Guard like they did, everything else, and make sure that it's going to go with prevailing winds and that anything inside of it's going to blow way out into the ocean where nothing's going to happen. You know,
and touche to the shoot down, because they were able and managed to get this. They had plans for the drop to go into much, much deeper water.
Yeah,
this thing's in 47 foot. They've already dove down to it, the whole 9 yards, and it's done. It's a done deal. But the amazing thing is to get it in that shallow a depth of water, that quickly, and then the recovery effort making it that much easier. Plus, when it hits at that shallow depth and you can recover more of it, you're not worried about it breaking apart and more debris and stuff going on shore, because naturally near the shoreline, you're going to have the wave action is going to push stuff towards the shore, not away, no matter what the current is. And effectively it reduced the amount of stuff that was going to be washing up on shore. So you don't see a whole bunch of people holding up stuff going, I'm going to sell this on eBay.
Yeah. Exactly. And I just brought up a couple of articles that maybe people have forgotten about. Here's one from The Guardian. This is 2019. I remember us talking about this on the show. Pentagon testing mass surveillance balloons across the U.S. Pentagon launching drug surveillance balloons over Midwest. Both of those from 2019. And, you know, that's the prime example of balloons that are made to do exactly this.
Exactly.
To surveil, to pick up radio contacts, everything.
And we use them extensively on the border. I mean, on the southern border, we don't really care about Canadians coming across too much.
No, not really.
But on the southern border, these things are everywhere. Aerostat is, that type of balloon is looks more like a dirigible. I mean, it is truly a balloon because it doesn't really have that much of a rigid structure, but it has a shape to it, and this shape allows it to streamline itself and point directionally into the direction of the wind to keep the instrumentation package at whatever, which is gimbaled. Most of the instrumentation packages are gimbaled. And what's weird is the China balloon, I did not see, I'm not going to say it didn't have it, but I honestly did not see it having an extensive gimbaling capability. And you think it would, because you want to keep those solar panel arrays, pointed directly at the sun as much as possible. So you can fill the batteries and do your transmissions and stuff, overnight. But, China batteries aren't that great anyway when you compare them to some of ours. So maybe there's a issue there. But, hang on. This is, here, let's, hang on. Actually, I'll just beam in a minute. Hang on.
Go ahead. So, yeah, it's interesting, folks, to take a look while Mike is gone. If you once again look at this package that was being delivered, this package that was floating over us, this is far different than what you would typically see in a weather balloon, any kind of scientific instrumentation, things like that. The amount of solar power that it's collecting to begin with would tell you that the capabilities on board would be pretty large.
Chris, I got Colonel, I won't say that. Colonel, you're on with me at the moment. I just merged you into the call. What can I do for you, sir?
Sir. We just came across some information. It looks like we have another one that's in our airspace. I wanted to see if you were interested and able to attend a conference briefing here with DARPA, along with we have a SpaceX launch scheduled coming up, and I wanted to see if you were open.
Yes. Yeah, I can do that. What time is the DARPA call?
It's going to be about 6 p.m. your time.
Okay. All right. I'll do that, sir. And you're actually on with me with Chris. I'll work with him on that, and I'll try to relay whatever information I can. So you have a third party on the call is what I'm getting at.
Roger that. That's okay.
Okay. So I'll be on the call. I may be a couple minutes late, but I'll be on there.
Roger that. And just to let you know, we flew a U-2 spy plane over the one that we have now and the previous one. Okay. And it looks like the payload on there does have some materials on there. And we're trying to figure out a risk-adverse assessment and another type of assessment we can explain on the briefing. We just want to make sure and get your opinion on the matter.
Okay. All right. All right. I'll do that, and then I'll advise further on the next call.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Okay.
Just some of the things you find yourself involved with regularly. The number of times that you have left our phone calls for those calls, I can't even count. Like, I don't have enough fingers and toes.
I accidentally, when I clicked it, I wasn't sure. Then I heard your voice again, and I was thinking, how do I verbally tell him that he's merged? I didn't want to hang up on him.
Hold on. Let me turn my radio down, sir.
Okay. Wow. I'm glad
he took that casually. He took that very well. Thank you so much for
I was expecting a different response.
The quite literal bomb drop of information that I guarantee you folks is that's hot. That's hot.
Yeah. That was
wow. Wow. I can't believe that we actively just got that on tape, because that's before literally any other media.
I'll ask him if because I guess if it was live, it would have been. So just run with it, I guess. And unless I call you with an emergency,
cool. He said it was cool, and he continued. So he obviously wasn't talking anything fully classified. No, nothing like that.
Yeah, the U-2 flyover would be absolutely classified.
Well, sure, but
even then, anybody can look. If we can look up and see a balloon, you can look up and see a U-2, and this is most likely. If this is now, I'm just going to surmise this. This may not be even what he's talking about, but the target balloon, and possible reason for a delayed launch today, and not yesterday. Yesterday was due to weather. There's an object that's loitering off the coast here, and it's been loitering longer than it should have, like adjusting altitudes and constantly. Well, it's gonna run out of its ability to do that, because here's how the balloons work. The balloons can manage their depending on the wind direction and wind speed, their direction for a certain period of time. But it's kind of like going against a current, and you can swim against the current and maintain your position for a little bit, but as soon as you kind of like let go, you're going to drift a little bit further away, and then you'll try to come back again. But eventually the current's going to win, and just like the wind, it will push you off the coast off our east coast, and that's apparently what's happening. So it's further out than it was yesterday, and I guess they sent up wherever the U-2 came from to overfly it and to determine what instrument package it has. That's how we, and just so you guys know, that's how we know the instrument package that it had before. We didn't send up a F-22 at that moment off the Aleutians that I'm aware of. I could be wrong. So, I mean, I don't know everything about this, but I do know some particulars. But it was looked at to see what instrument package it has. But if you overfly it, the problem is you have to get an oblique angle to the picture because if you overfly it, obviously you can't see through the balloon.
Yeah.
But the reason for overflight is this, and this is not classified. This is fairly
directional signal going up to satellites.
Well, not only that. Yeah. Well, there was question about whether or not we were jamming this balloon. I'm not going to confirm or deny whether we were or not. I will confirm this because I have personal knowledge of what I'm about to tell you, is that virtually all of the communications going to and from this balloon have been intercepted, and we have it. So it's not like it's a big mystery as to what it was listening to or what it was, looking at. The camera system on board is fairly archaic. I mean, it's just not. It's not very sophisticated. The other question is whether or not it has LiDAR. That's something that has not been brought up in any of the articles. But the LiDAR question has been a very important question to ask, because with LiDAR, on a evening flyover of a specific base or facility, LiDAR can actually draw whatever objects are in that area. If your roof is made of a certain material, the LiDAR can be adjusted to see through the roof. I don't know if you're aware of that. Oh,
sure, absolutely. It's no different than getting penetration depth through soil.
That's what she said.
Or another substrate. All you do instead of setting
it's just like ground penetrating radar.
Yeah, precisely. Except now you've set your distance to 200 feet, so you fly at 190.
Right, exactly. So, or you change the frequency bandwidth range on the signal going out, and then you do a phased signal coming in, and the phased signal kind of turns off the roof of a building, especially if you're flying over a soft roof building, like some of your very large buildings are, where they have minor girders going across, but a large expanse of a single type material, whether it's aluminum or whether it's even canvas or whatever it is, you can see right through it. We went off tangent a little bit.
Well, I mean, that's just the nature of the technology that we're dealing with. And, while you were connecting with that call, what I was vamping on was the actual balloon itself, and I was showing images of it, and just the size of the package once again, and the amount of solar array on it. Like you said, dealing with archaic technology and probably something like LiDAR, things like that. There is an incredible amount of solar gathering capability on that, like the equivalent almost of like satellite.
It is. I mean, when you look at the gondola of this, it very much resembles some of our older spy satellites.
Oh God, absolutely.
Our mid-range satellites. If you want to know what one of our Canyon or Crystal satellites look like, all you got to do is look at the Hubble Space Telescope. They're identical for a reason, because they're made by the same people. But so you have all of this technology that a lot of people question is, well, why wouldn't they just use their satellites? Well, your satellites are not going to gain cellular signals unless you have an incredible array to do that. And China is not there yet. We can pick up cellular signals from satellites all day long. In fact, to prove that, your current cell phone that you currently have, your current smartphone, if you bought it in the last 3 to 5 years, that cell phone will have the ability to have satellite communication as soon as it becomes available, given to us by none other than Elon Musk at SpaceX and T-Mobile. So that's going to happen with the phone you're talking to or listening to this on right now, possibly, because most people listen on mobile, is going to have the ability to speak to satellites. You'll be able to use it in emergency situations and what have you, and they'll be able to track you anywhere in the world. You no longer have to hang a cell tower. So just some side information for those, and you can look it up. It's true. I'm not making this stuff up.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and we've talked about this numerous times. We've talked about the capabilities of not only our mobile devices, but other devices with other guests like Dr. John Hall and Robert Duncan. And once again, make no mistake, what we have borne witness to here is an incursion test. A litmus test. Now, and it's not the first time. Like, there were a couple of balloon instances during Trump's presidency.
There were 3 supposed that they've denied it, but I can confirm at least 2 that did happen. But they didn't loiter anywhere near as long as this. But just to go over this a little bit, the Chinese probably learned this from us.
Yeah.
Because if anyone is going to talk about why that balloon is here, obviously it's here to stimulate our defense network to find out, what it is that we're doing.
Poking bears.
If you go back in time to 1963, we did that very same thing during the Cuban Missile Crisis with Cuba with the Palladium system. And so what that was a Navy ship broadcast a signal. And that signal was a modified Doppler signal, much like current modern technology, which is DRFM technology. But that signal was sent towards Havana and that received by the SA-12 radar system that they had. And that system would see that as a plane taking off, scrambling from, say, Key West and hauling ass towards Havana, which would stimulate their systems. To more stimulate the systems, a submarine was moved towards very close to Havana and launched a series of balloons with reflectors inside them that looked much like a cube and a sphere. And these balloons were launched to stimulate the systems. And the SA-12 system lit up like a Christmas tree, thinking that hundreds of planes are now on the way. And they scrambled one of their aircraft out to meet these targets, which were actually balloons. And the signal from Palladium, which was bouncing back and forth between all of these reflector balloons, was turned off. And so the pilot, as he was radioing back to Cuba, saying, I have the target, and then they turned it off, and they went, I no longer have the target. Their target disappeared. So balloons have a lot of uses, and the Chinese are simply testing us because this is going to be political in nature, but it is my personal opinion that because of the particular administration that we currently have, they felt like it would be a good time to test us, especially with all the tensions going on between China and Taiwan and us and Ukraine and Russia and all these other, all these hotspots that are going on around the world. What better time to test us when we're distracted with all these other things than to send a couple of innocuous balloons across our border and to test us to see exactly how we would respond. And they have partly our response. But keep in mind, if a balloon is coming across, and we kind of have the idea that we know that it's coming across to test our defense system, are we going to actually show it what we're going to do? Because we can tell the difference between a balloon and other things. And, so I don't think their test went too well. In fact, it backfired, especially in regards to Blinken going over to China. That was canceled. That was a meeting they very much wanted to have. So that kind of throws it back to wonder, why would they do this? Why is the timing so bad? Why would they do it now and only to basically be embarrassed by it?
Well, and why the balloon over Colombia and Venezuela? Why the others?
Right. Where that balloon's heading to? It's heading towards the Caribbean now. So I think that balloon's going on vacation.
Headed over to Cuba.
Yeah, probably is.
But and we really do have to explore this a whole lot more. We really do have to let things kind of shake out. Once again, I know a lot of people were upset, like, why wasn't it destroyed immediately? It's like, dude, that's 3 city buses getting ready to fall. Yeah. Can you predict exactly where it's going to land or what's inside or what have you?
And why would you destroy something when you can gather just as much intelligence by monitoring it and watching where it goes and how they respond to us?
Yeah.
Not
monitoring
it. Yeah, we're monitoring it. We have all the signals intelligence that came from it. 3 different agencies gathered all of that. They have it. They've got it stored in Bluffdale. They got it stored at Fort Meade. They've got it stored in Fairfax, Virginia. And anyone that can look up and see what agencies I'm referring to. And so this information that we now have is a plethora of intelligence gathering that we got from them. So now we know their monitoring capabilities, some of the other things, and plus we have their equipment. I mean, it's not like you can shoot down a spy satellite and then go pick it up and check it out.
Well, and, hold on, because I thought that I posted an article just a second ago. No intent on recovering debris. I don't think, yeah. Oh, it was that they have no intent on returning the debris.
Yeah, returning, yeah. Yeah, that
they won't be returning it to China, much like whenever we lost a plane over there Australia. In the water. They scurried their boats and got it, and we got some of it back, but we didn't get it all back.
No. We lost Skylab over Australia, and there's a whole interesting documentary about that.
But I think that's a little bit different of a situation though, because that was an international consortium that put that together for research purpose. This is a little bit different, Yeah,
I agree. That was a bad analogy on my part, but
I mean, when you're talking about scuttling something, especially and intentional scuttling, like you said, you can show the fact that the second balloon that was out there was scuttled intentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. And there's a lot of, I guess, because I'm not on the political side, I don't really get into a lot of that scale. I look at it from a military standpoint, from just even from your average citizen standpoint of we need answers to some of these questions that the answer is not necessarily classified that people want answers to, like why did we wait for it to go off the coast and all these different things, and why aren't these other balloons getting some of the limelight right now? I mean, what's going on with the balloon that was lost in the mid to upper Pacific Ocean? That was an hour and I think 38 minutes after this balloon went down.
Yeah.
The kill signal was sent. It takes as you could tell by this balloon going down, it took a long time for that balloon to come down. But the other scenario is we had 5 balloons that were monitored at that moment in time when they were all aloft. You had the one that obviously we're talking about. You have the one that was sent the kill signal. You have the one that went over Latin America, and then you have the one over Canada and then another one that's somewhere else. I won't say where that one's at. So you have all these balloons, and there's more than even 5, I believe. It's just that there are 5 that were in our sphere of monitoring.
Well, and the Hawaiian one 4 months ago.
Yep. Yeah, and that one was right off the shore. I mean, that was close to Hawaii. And keep in mind, Hawaii is Pearl Harbor. It's an intelligence asset for us. There's an NSA facility there, and if anyone may not know this, but actually that's where Snowden worked. Was at the Hawaii facility.
Yep.
So a lot of this gathering of intelligence is a key and important role. ISR is now something that is across the board becoming more and more, I guess, in the public eye. And because the public doesn't really, you don't have a lot of intelligence heroes. You got the Gary Powers of the world and stuff like that. But you have those stars that are on the CIA wall when you walk in. Those that have left us because of their mission critical job and something happened. And you have others that go unknown. You have so many things like that. And then you have the hundreds of thousands. You have over 40,000 that work at one specific facility, in Baltimore or just outside of Baltimore, Fort Meade. So you have all of these assets and the intelligence gathering, part of the intelligence community is a key asset to any country. That's if you don't know what your enemy's doing or you don't know what someone's doing, you're not really going to be educated when you send in your fighters to go do whatever it is that they need to do. So this is absolutely a key aspect that every country puts a lot of weight, a lot of money into. We do. And then when people see something like this, like we sent up an F-22 to shoot down a balloon, people start to scoff at that.
Well, and a lot of people scoffed. A lot of people, especially in UFO, UAP communities, scoffed. Things like that. Over the balloon thing, I, of course, posted numerous references to the V-shaped, supersonic capable balloons that are out there. Things like that are made for near space travel, like the size of hangars. Huge balloons.
And your pictures of those, there's one that's blue, kind of a bluish color. I don't know if you saw
like
that
blue
one.
and silver. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know this. The blackbird, guess what color it was?
Silver.
And it was blue.
Yeah.
It's a dark blue. So, a lot of people think it's black, and that's how we got the name blackbird, but no, it's actually blue.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. And when these intelligence platforms, they don't have to be a screaming fast 3.5 Mach, jet flying over above that can escape missiles. As something as simple as a balloon going around can do it. Now, keep in mind, there's other types of ways of gathering intelligence, which China has been blamed on and has been made famous recently with the drones coming from that one ship, start with a B. I can't remember the name of it now. The ship that was, following or mirroring one of our ships off the West Coast. And, we got some footage of that. But, the thing that you need to look at is that drones and balloons balloons, satellites are probably account for 80% of our intelligence gathering.
Yep.
Whereas there's obviously another 20% or more to go, and there's some technologies that are being utilized right now that I just got a message. Oh, I need to join this call here.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I was going to say, I love this conversation. I love where it's going, but you are actively being called on by security folks with the National Security Administration for a conference call. Man, I can't thank you enough for coming on, talking about this. I wish we had more time, but I can't think of a better reason to let you go, Mike. Let everybody know where they can go to find the latest on this, where they can go to follow you, where they can go to follow the work of 5x5 News.
Your best two places is for more current stuff where I'm just chit-chatting or arguing with people will be on Twitter. Just search for 5x5 News there. Or search for 5x5 News and it's 5x5 is what it looks like. It's 5, the letter X, and then 5, and then News on YouTube, and you'll find pretty much most of the current stuff. I'll be updating stuff here pretty quick after I finalize the rest of my Afghanistan efforts here, and then very near future.
Wow. Mike, I can't thank you enough once again, man. You're always there to cover this stuff, and as proofed in this conversation tonight, it ain't fake. Thank you so much, my friend. You take care. You be safe. And thank you, as always, for everything you do for us and for everything out there. Take care of yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, man. Thank you.
Wow, what an incredible conversation with Mike Turber. Once again, the number of times that we have just been in casual conversation or text, and he'll send me a screenshot of like, ooh, conference call, gotta go. With the names on the conference call. You heard it right here, folks, from an actual colonel in the intelligence community talking about the capabilities of the craft, about the fact that we actually flew a U-2 over it, got all kinds of readings from instrumentation, things like that. So we will be following this story and keeping up with it with our good friend Mike Turber. Thank you, as always, my friend. While you are online checking out all of the amazing work from Mike Turber and 5x5 News, make sure to stop on by Curious Realm. CuriousRealm.com is where you can find everything. That's where you can find all of the episodes. That is where you can follow us live every week. We go live to the website. You can get our free app and tune in to the live stream on the website. That's where the Knowledge Vault is, with all kinds of declassified government materials and documents, things like that. That is also where our newly reconstructed Curious Realm store is located. CuriousRealm.com/store is the page to visit, folks. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for continuing to tune in week after week. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and remember, stay curious. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Curious Realm. Stay tuned for more guests, forbidden topics, and hidden truths. Download the official Curious Realm app and view the Knowledge Vault on our website, CuriousRealm.com. Follow us on social media by searching Curious Realm. Curious Realm is available on your favorite podcast services, as well as YouTube, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV through the APR TV app, available on all app markets. Curious Realm is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more great content or to become a sponsor of Curious Realm or other podcasts, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Thanks for listening. Stay curious. And remember, the other side is always watching.